Hi everyone, it's nice to see you again. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Alex, and today I thought I'd talk about houseplants again, specifically plants that I think work really well with certain interior design styles. Now, of course, these are just my opinions, so if you have a houseplant that you love, you should definitely go with whatever makes you happy. But I just think the plants I'll be talking about today work particularly well with these interior design styles, so I figured I'd share them with you. All right, well, let's just jump right in. So the first plant on our list today is the snake plant. Now this one, aside from being interesting to look at and providing a nice vertical element, is also easy to care for and tolerant of low light. The snake plant works well in all kinds of styles, but I think it looks especially great in a home with a more modern aesthetic. The leaves have beautiful variations in colors depending on which type of snake plant you get, but they're not overly fussy, and the whole thing can get pretty tall so it can start to become a focal point in a room. Because these plants grow vertically but not out to the sides, they're great for being tucked into a corner or any area where there's not a lot of floor space. I think these look best in simple planters if you're going for a more modern look, just like I try to do in my living room. But they also look really good in baskets if you're after a more relaxed style. In warm climates, you'll see them outdoors, usually planted along a sidewalk or in a lawn planter. Taking inspiration from this, you could do something similar in your interior as well, by grouping them together to make a really big visual impact. I really love this plant, so I definitely recommend it. The next plant on the list that works really well in modern minimalistic homes is any type of cactus. Now, whether you have one large cactus or a group of medium-sized ones, they're all so beautiful and so sculptural. Especially when featured in a minimalistic interior, they really take center stage. They look great against concrete or white, and the larger they get, the more dramatic they look. The big ones can be very expensive though, but you could also set up a group of small cacti at different heights, tucked amongst other decorative objects for a nice display. Even one or two can make a statement. Just make sure that wherever you put them, they get the most amount of light possible. I think they look best in solid colored planters with simple shapes. This last image here of the huge cacti in a white space is my favorite. Placed around a simple sofa and a classic Eames chair, this whole room looks just gorgeous. Next on the list, we have something that's the complete opposite of cacti, which is English ivy. The trailing nature of English ivy, along with the clusters of leaves, make it a great fit for places like cottages or farmhouses. Because it kind of goes every which way as it grows, it provides a relaxed, casual vibe, and looks best either in a hanging planter or up on a shelf so you can enjoy the trailing stems. You can find varieties that have variegation in their leaves too. Even when the plants are small, they look good, but of course the larger they get, the more of a visual impact they'll make. This one here looks really good paired with a white painted frame. Now, care-wise, they're fairly easy, but they are prone to pests, so make sure to check the leaves every once in a while to make sure they're okay. As far as planter pots, I think they look the best with pots that have more decorative forms. And of course, you can never go wrong with a good urn. I think English ivy is definitely worth considering if you have a cottage-style interior. Another category of plants that would also work really well in cottage-style interiors are ferns. Now, ferns offer a beautiful classical look that also works great in more traditional interiors. The maidenhair fern in particular provides a very delicate accent to any space. What I find interesting about ferns is that depending on the size, they can bring a very different character to a room. This one on the bookshelf looks great, but its big brother with its cascading stems makes for a very dramatic focal point. I love how dynamic they can look too, like this one that looks like it's exploding out of the planter, whereas this large trailing fern looks very refined and elegant. Now, planter-wise, they look good in anything really, especially baskets, except that once they get large enough, you won't really see the planter pot at all. Now, these aren't the easiest plants to take care of, admittedly, as they require more attention than other types of plants. But if you like the look, you can also find hardier varieties, like either foxtail ferns or rabbit's foot fern, which are easier to keep alive. If you have a traditional style home, then I'd recommend the next item on the list, which is topiaries. I absolutely adore topiaries. I think they're so pretty. Because they're sculpted, they look really great with traditional style interiors since they provide a more formal look. Different types of plants can be pruned into topiaries as well, so there's a good variety to choose from. And you're not limited to the ball shape either. You can also train trailing plants on wire forms to create interesting shapes. Here's our old friend the English ivy again. Tall topiaries sometimes have multiple clusters of leaves, which are even more fanciful, but even small ones really bring an air of elegance and refinement into a space. They also, of course, look great when you put multiples together. Now, one thing to note about topiaries is that you really want to keep them right next to a window so they get as much light as possible. If you set up a display away from a window, don't keep them there for very long or else they'll be really unhappy. For planter pots, these look absolutely gorgeous in simple but weathered terracotta pots. But I think these beautifully sculpted pots also look amazing. Looking at all these images, I think I need to run out and buy some topiaries for myself because I really want some now. Moving on to the next plant on the list, we have the bird of paradise. This one is a very popular plant and extremely versatile in that it works well with a lot of different interior design styles. It's characterized by its big size and large leaves, but you can also find varieties whose leaves are smaller but more numerous. Anywhere this plant is put, it makes a statement and looks good with all sorts of planter pots. With more casual styles, it brings a tropical vibe, like you see here in this office, and in this sunroom where it's paired with a rattan chair. In more modern homes, it takes on a more sophisticated look while still maintaining its free-spiritedness. It looks good against both light and dark colors too. Here in this image, it looks right at home surrounded by mid-century modern items, but I find it especially beautiful in more industrial settings. Here in this loft, there are a pair of them against the focal wood wall, and flanking the TV and media cabinet, they make a really nice composition. In this dining room, there's one tucked into the corner, and in this image here you can see that it really looks great surrounded by the industrial elements of the space. It's a good idea to use this plant in a room that has tall ceilings because once they take off, they get huge. In my home, the ceilings are only 8 feet tall, and I'm starting to worry a little bit about what to do if my bird of paradise gets any bigger. Up next is the Monstera deliciosa, also known as the Swiss cheese plant. This is one houseplant that most people know and is widely beloved for the fenestrations on its leaves and how easy it is to care for. Once they get bigger, the leaves look very striking, especially against light-colored walls. Monsteras look good everywhere, but I think they look the best when featured in mid-century modern homes, as it was a super popular plant in the 60s and 70s. There's just something about the shape of the leaves that looks perfect next to the wood elements of mid-century interiors. Here's an image of a beautifully restored mid-century living room, but I think it could still benefit from a Monstera plant. The same as this space here, it's just begging for the large fenestrated leaves of the iconic Swiss cheese plant. Even cuttings or smaller specimens will make a big impact in any interior. I think they look best when put in simple planters that don't compete with the plant itself. Anywhere you put a Monstera, it'll be a showstopper. If you have a bohemian style interior, then I'd recommend the next plant on the list, which is a sugar vine. Now, sugar vines aren't super common, but I think they're worth mentioning because of their interesting leaves and vigorous growth once they get established. The leaves are shaped like little clovers, and their trailing nature makes them great for a bohemian style interior or any space that's not too formal. They make great hanging plants, but with all those little leaves, they are visually busy, so if you're going for a minimalistic interior, this isn't the right plant for you. The fun thing about sugar vines is they can start off small, but once they get established, they will go crazy. The tendrils like to spread out in all directions. My own sugar vine is a few years old now, and even though I have it on a shelf near the ceiling, it's reached down to the floor. It's also kind of taking over my bookshelf too, weaving itself around my books, which I really love. If you happen to come across this plant, I'd recommend getting it. Next up on the list is a super common one, the fiddle-leaf fig. This one might be the most popular plant on the list along with the Monstera. They're just everywhere now. These plants make great indoor trees with the right conditions and enough time, and you'll see them with either the leaves going all the way down to the base, or oftentimes looking more like a topiary with a bare trunk on the bottom. You'll find these in pretty much every single farmhouse style interior, and they look great when put in baskets. This is another plant that gets really huge, so it really fills a room with a tall ceiling, and apparently it's also great for standing awkwardly next to like you're afraid it's going to bite you. Now, these plants look okay in modern homes, but I think they look the best in transitional or traditional interiors. This image on the right is my favorite. The fiddly fig looks absolutely amazing surrounded by gilded frames and traditional furnishings. As anyone who's had one can probably tell you though, they can be quite finicky and challenging to care for. Mine is doing better now, but for a long while I felt like I couldn't even so much as look at it the wrong way without it dropping a leaf. The last category of plants that I want to talk about today are orchids. Now what can I say about orchids? They're beautiful and they go with everything. You can find them in a wide range of colors, and with the right care, the blooms can last for months. They make even more of a statement when planted in clusters like these examples here. I really like the bowl planters too. Even just one plant really adds charm and beauty to an interior, and they also look great when placed in groups. No matter how you display an orchid, it'll look effortlessly elegant. There are some really creative ways to showcase them too though. Here in this photo, the base is wrapped in moss and placed onto a stone slab. And in this example, they're hung on spherical planters lined with moss. I definitely want to steal this idea. They look great in traditional style planters, but also in more simple ones. Here you see a few of them in a simple rectangular wooden box, and in this photo a group of simple white orchids looks striking in a silver bowl. This is one plant where you can really get creative with the planter pots. And they really do look great in any style interior. When in doubt, go for an orchid, I say. Now they are kind of difficult to get to bloom again. Of all the orchids I've had, I've only had one rebloom successfully, but I'm going to keep trying because they're so beautiful, they're definitely worth the trouble. Alright, that's it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit that like button and leave a comment. I'd love to know about your favorite plants and what interior design style you have in your home. Alright, take care everyone. We'll see you next time.